Hi there, it's Michelle from CNC Designs. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in New Zealand, and I'm bringing you another Global Monthly Video Hop. So once a month, I team up with demonstrators across the world, and we make videos based on a specific theme that we choose. So this month's theme is scraps. So we're going to show you different projects you can make using scraps. So don't throw those scraps out when you're making your cards. But before I forget, if you look in the description below this video, you will see links to all the other participants for this month's video hop. So once you're done watching my video, and I hope you give me a thumbs up, click on one of the links, or as many as you'd like, to hop over to the other demonstrators' videos and see what they've done with scraps this month. So when I think of scraps, I think of this. This is my scrap drawer. I actually have two scrap drawers. This is my scrap strips, and then I have one that just, this one's in the wrong place, but other larger scraps that I can use because there's still enough room to cut something smaller out. So I have drawers that I pop everything in, and I end up with lots of little strips, and if you do any card making, you probably are the same. You get these strips when you're making the different layers on your cards, because as you make more layers, you cut the cardstock down slightly each time, so you end up with lots of strips. I've got tons and tons of white ones because I have a lot of white layers for the inside of my cards, and they tend to be the exact same width. So those are good to keep if you just need a little sentiment to stamp on. That's why I keep those. The other things that you can do with scraps like that, which I have done other videos, so look back a year or so on my video list, you will see videos showing how to make other type cards, but things like that. So those are just scraps of designer series paper I had that I just gave myself a background for that card. So they're great, and like even for the inside of the card, sometimes I just use that little bit of scrap strip for the inside. Other things that I've done is almost like a collage, like a quilt patching. So this is scraps of cardstock, and I just put it together in different sections, glued it onto a rectangle piece of cardstock, and then made that the front focal point of my card. But this time around, I'm going to do something slightly different. I like to change it up. So if you do want to learn how to do things with your straight strips of scraps, check out the video I did a few years ago, and you'll see some interesting cards. I've even woven the strips. I will also, in the description of this one, list all the products that I use in the card that we're going to make today. So if you want to purchase any of those, you'll see the list with the product code. You can go to my website, michellekritchley.stampinup.net, if you live in New Zealand and don't already have a demonstrator. If you live outside of New Zealand, contact your demonstrator or contact stampinup.com to find a demonstrator near you to purchase any of these products. So these cards were made with some scraps. And you're probably thinking, oh, they don't look like they are. But recently I was prepping for a large class that I taught with other demonstrators. So there were about 40 customers, and I had to make kits for all of them beforehand. And I also have the video showing how to do this one. So that was the card that they did in the class. And I pre-cut some of the things. So I pre-cut two of the curtains, and I pre-cut this little banner. Now with those dies, where'd they go? Those are the Zany Zoo Dies. So that's what they look like. So when I was pre-cutting, like the banner, I put two of them together, and I ended up with this. So I was cutting banners out of my cardstock, and I was thinking, I'm not going to throw that away because those are scrap pieces I might be able to use. So by cutting these in that section, I ended up with lots of diamonds. Similar thing happened when I was cutting the curtains. I had one curtain here and another on the other side, and I ended up with this scrap. So there's one curtain die and then the other curtain die there. So I ended up with these interesting scrap pieces. And because I knew I had a scrap theme coming up, I thought, I will try to do something with those pieces of scrap to show that you don't just use the strips. So I did. And this is one of the cards I made. So this is the lovely designer series paper, inked Botanicals. And because it looks like there's stems and stuff, I ended up creating flowers out of these little diamond shapes. So I just put a few together. Here I put 6 together. There I put 4 together. Glued them, did a bit of sponging to make them look like flowers, and then I placed them so it looked like the stem for the designer series paper was in the background. And then I just put a sentiment. So with this card that I'm doing today, I'm only using one stamp, and it's the Good Feeling stamp. It has some really nice big words that can take up a lot of space on the front of your card, and you just do up the background to match. So I'll be using that one. So that's a card I made. And then when I cut the designer series paper, it was a 6 by 6 inch piece, and I had a little left over, so I didn't waste it. I put it on the inside. So that's one thing you can do with your scraps. And this is another one. Now I'm going to recreate this card. Of course, I'm going to do it slightly different. I try to do things slightly different in my videos so you can have like 2 ideas of how to make the card. So with this one, this is using the scraps that I ended up with when I cut the ends off, and then I cut them in half and just made an interesting pattern around a piece of cardstock, and then some design and put it on the designer series paper, and I ran it through the Fern's embossing folder to give it some texture, some interest. Used one of the stamps from the set I just showed you, and I've got some white die cuts just to give it a bit more interest. And again, a bit of scrap on the inside. So we're going to recreate this card, and I will talk you through that. So the designer series paper I'm using is the inked Botanicals. Has lots of interesting colors and designs that almost look like pressed flowers to me. That's what I think of them. Some of them look like, you know, I used to do that as a kid. Got the flower press, or you could just put them inside a book and put weight on both sides of paper with your flowers in the middle and press them. And sometimes on the paper you would get an interesting image. So it's the inked Botanicals. And you need your card base. So whatever country you're in, here in New Zealand, we use A4 cardstock, cut it in half to create a A5 piece, score that in the middle to create an A5 card. So this one is actually the long side, but the card I'm going to do today, I'm actually using our traditional left opening. So this is portrait, or I could turn it that way and do it landscape. I haven't decided yet. From the same paper, I'm just using a different background. So you got all the interesting like florals there, but I'm just going with this. Just 2 colors in this, petal pink and Calypso coral. So got the Calypso coral background. I have the white card for the inside, which happens to be the same size as the front. So that'll be on the inside of my card. And when I cut that piece, I have a scrap piece left over. So I'm going to pop that on the inside of the card as well. So let's get started showing you how to make this. So the first thing is I cut apart, either cut apart or just pull apart your little scrap bits, depending on what your scraps are. So I've already pulled a bunch of those apart, and that's with the petal pink cardstock, which is why this paper was perfect for this project. I'm just going to close one of those curtains because this light is shining and giving a glare. Okay, I closed the blinds. I don't know how much of a glare that's helped with, but hopefully you'll be able to see okay. Sorry about that. So I will decide which direction in a minute once I glue everything on. So with this, you do want to use glue because you want to have your wiggle room. And I thought to speed it up, instead of cutting all these in half like I did there, and I did half and half, I'm just going to do them in large sections. So I just want to first have a bit of a look to see how I'm going to design this. You can use your grid paper to help you line up if you want things to be perfectly in the center. I'd have to move it over here to see where the actual center is, but I know the center is about 5 1/4. I mean, no, this is the long ways. So the center, this is 14.8. So it'll be 7.4 centimeter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So roughly there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep. So that's roughly. I'm looking at this middle line here. See that central line? So that's roughly the center of this paper. But being paper craft, handmade, it doesn't really matter if it's not perfect because it's handmade, and I've yet to have somebody say to me, that's not lined up perfect. I have had some people tell me things are stamped crooked. I'm kind of known for doing that. But that's okay. So my idea now, instead of cutting out all those little pieces, I'm going to recreate the design by just using the whole piece. That saves time, less gluing. I should have thought of that with the first card, but you think of different things when you're designing stuff. And so that will basically be using my scraps. So it's covering it up and making kind of an interesting image in between. And then I will use half cuts of other ones to fill in the top and bottom. So when this is cut in half, I can use half at the top and half at the bottom, and then the same for the edges. So I'm going to glue the centers first. And I might get one with a better point. See, that one I ripped off. Whoop. I ripped that so it doesn't have a nice point, and that one has a nicer point. So I might swap it out for a nicer point. And if I start, just got myself crooked now. If I start, I think in the center, I'll just put a little bit of glue. Now I'm going to, the other one I embossed afterwards, and 2 reasons. 1, to give it some interest, and 2, because it helps to press the pieces in together so you don't have any like loose ends sticking out. This one I'm going to use a die. I'm going to use the stitched Greenery die. So see, it's a bunch of stitched leaves, but it doesn't cut all the way through. So I'm going to use that to give us some interest. I'm not going to push it down really hard because I might need to move it. So that's why I'm using glue, because with liquid glue it gives you wiggle room. And by that I mean you can wiggle it into place. So if I just set that lightly there and then do the last one, and then I can see if I've got enough even space between them. I mean, some people just like to put it down, and that's fine, but I'm slightly OCD and like to make things look good. However, keeping in mind the center is going to be covered with our sentiment. So if I push them all the way together, then I have to fill in something at the top and the bottom. So I am leaving a little gap between them, and then it won't matter that it's not touching the total edge. Okay, so I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a bit. Yep, well, that's going to be good enough. So that's my starting point. So that's my starting point. Interesting looking. Now I'm going to put ones on the outer edges. And so with the scrap, if you're going to do a scrap card, keep in mind what you want your final thing to look like, as well as how much time it's going to take to make. So you want to do something that's not going to take forever. I'm wondering about closing the gap with this one. Again, I'm going to leave it slightly loose. I kind of like the look of the closing the gap on that, but let's see if I can recreate it on the other side. I've also done, I'm not sure if it's in that video that I did a few years ago because I haven't watched it in a while, but I've also done where I've just put different strips of cardstock and ended up stamping on top of the cardstock. So the strips of cardstock became my background and I just stamped right on top of it. So I think that's looking kind of interesting. Sort of like closing that gap. Okay, and then we'll do the top and bottom. And so I hope you like watching people glue things. I would fast forward, but I'm not that savvy with the video recording yet. I haven't got any editing programs yet, but I have seen lots of videos where people fast forward. So I end up just having to chat to you while I do this. And do that one. The last bit I might pause it and just finish it up because I think you're getting the idea here how to do it. Okay. Now the parts here, I'm only going to have half of it, so I don't want to glue the whole thing. Now I could cut it straight in half, but I'm not sure if it's going to cut evenly. So I'm going to glue it down and then I'm going to cut the back side of it off with my trimmer or just scissors. I'm not sure yet. So just show you that part. So don't only glue on part of it, the part that's going to go on the paper, on your designer series paper. Could be gluing this straight onto cardstock. I could stamp on the cardstock on the back if I want it. So see, that's looking a bit, showing a bit of that corner there. I'm going to move it up slightly. That's why it's good to have the wiggle room to make it so it evenly covers that line there. Try to cover that. So what I was doing there is I'm trying to cover the edge of the DSP right there. And so I've got it like that. And then I'll show you this inside bit. And that's where you can grab the ones that have a bad edge and use it on the edge over here. Now look at how much you're going to use. So I'm only going to use up to about there, so I don't need to glue the whole thing. Just enough glue. Don't go overboard with your glue because you'll end up having it sticky everywhere. You definitely don't want that. Okay, so we're going to put that where it kind of pretty much touches the center. And just sliding that top one over slightly. So once you get to the edges, and only glue the edges down, then you can turn it over. And you could take a trimmer if you want, or you can just use your handy old snips. And I'm just going to cut across that line right up to the edge of the DSP. Now, sometimes those scrap pieces can be used for other projects. So I'm just going to cut right there. And then the tips off those other pieces. Now that piece I cut off there, I could use on the other side because it's short enough, so I can use it there. So I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to fill in the rest of this so you can see it all done and don't have to watch me gluing it all, but I just wanted to show you. So now I'm getting this interesting look here. I almost think it looks like a butterfly or a dragonfly. See, this one, I had the gaps in it, so I thought it looked like a dragonfly, and that's why I did it this direction. Or it could look like leaves going up, because I've got the leaves there. So I will finish this up and then show you the end result. Okay, so I've finished that, and I've run it through the die cutting machine with my stitched greenery die, and here we go. So see, we have the nice stitched, and that's helped to press down the glued part. So that's the back. I trimmed all the edges off, and you end up with some interesting scraps from trimming the edges off. So I ended up with these cute little bits of scrap that I could use for something else if I wanted to. So it's up to you how much scrap you want to keep. Like, look at these little guys. That could be the start of a flower. So that's the front of the card done. Now I haven't decided which direction I'm going to do this card yet, so I will leave that there. Now my scrap piece here for the inside, I'm going to go ahead and glue to one edge, because if it goes this way, that's fine, or it can go that way, either direction. I could glue it right to the edge, but because the background of the cardstock is the same color, I'm going to glue it just slightly off so you see a little bit of white as well. So it just gives you a little bit of interest to the edge. So this is just the piece, because the cardstock started out as square 6 by 6 inches, and the front of my cardstock is not that size. Here in New Zealand, the layer I used for the front is 10 centimeters by 14.3. So that's less than the 6 by 6. So now for the inside of my card, whichever way I do, I can either go that way if I'm doing this type of card, or I could put it this direction, go that way. I could even have it on the left of the card. I will decide that later on. So I'll wait to put the inside on, but I can put the outside on. I'm just going to tape that down. Doesn't really matter which direction up I go. I can have a look, see if it looks symmetrical or if there's something I like better than others, but I think that looks fine. I'll just tape that on. When I'm putting rectangular things, squares, rectangles, easy shapes, I usually just use tear and tape, because I can just do a strip and it's quick and easy. You know, sometimes you can do glue, that's fine, but tear and tape is more economical price-wise, and I just like to use that for my straight things that I do not need to wiggle. So I don't need to wiggle this into place, but I sometimes put things down crooked. So I have the tab method. If you watch any of my videos, you know my tab method. I pull up a little tab on each corner of my tape. If you have any hanging over like that, just fold it back. And if you haven't figured it out already, the reason it's called tear and tape is because you don't need to cut it off. You can actually tear the strips. The paper is that good that it just tears right off. So it saves you time having to. I know people put the tape on, get the scissors out, cut it, put the scissors down, then do that. That just takes a lot of time. So it doesn't matter which way around I'm doing this, because it's only going to fit one direction. So with the tearing method, you only have a little bit exposed, a little bit of adhesive exposed. So if you press on the non-exposed corners, like that one there, and this side over here, make sure, I'll put it up close so you can actually see it. Make sure you have like an even border if that's what you're going for. So make sure you got your even border, pressing on the non-exposed part. And when you're happy with that, push on the exposed corners and then just peel that off. Now, if I found that that was crooked, it's easier to peel off that little tiny bit that's stuck down without ruining my card to reposition it. So just pull off your paper. And then your card is the way you want. Now, let's do the words. So with the words, I'm actually going to use the Stamparatus because I want to have multicolors on this stamp. This one, I stamped the whole thing in black, and then I stamped again in the petal pink and the Calypso coral and then cut those sections out and stuck it on here. This time I'm going to show you the method of doing your watercolor pens onto your stamp. And I'm using the Stamparatus because sometimes you don't get a really dark image when you do that. So this allows me to ink it up and stamp it multiple times. So I'm going to start with the black. So the original one, I did the whole thing in my Memento black, stamped the whole thing. So behind there, the words mind and heart are in black. But this time I decided I want to do it a bit different. So I'm going to use the brush tip of the pen and just brush over the parts I want to be in black. Now use the edge of it unless you come up to a little part that's very close. And you're going to have to do what's called the huffing method. So when you put the ink on here, it will dry, but it's water-based, so if I huff on it, which is the warm air from my mouth, you know, like when cold weather and you're outside and you huff and you see the steam coming out, that's what you need to do. It will moisten it again so I can stamp it. Now, I don't want to color the whole thing in one go because I don't want it to dry too quickly. So I take that, and you're going to hear me huff. So that just puts some warm air on there to reactivate the ink in case it dried. And then I'm just going to press it. And there we go. I had one little spot. I put the ink in the wrong place. So now I'm going to do the other part. Now I could do all the colors in once, but the thing is that's a lot to have to reactivate, and so when you huff on it, some colors might reactivate and some might not. And this way I can do part of it and then go over and do the other colors. So I'm just basically coloring in my letters. Whoop. So see there, I do see I got some on that E. So I'm just going to color in the letters. And then I will huff on this again to get it all. Now I haven't cleaned the top part off because it doesn't matter, it's going to go in the exact same spot. So if there is any at the top that's still wet, that's okay. Take it off, huff on it. Just extra huff just in case. And press where you have the ink. Yeah, and that came out really good. A little faint, but that's okay. I like that. So that's fine. Now I'm going to clean that. Just so I don't get any of the black onto my colored pens. Now this is our chamois, used a lot. It does stain, but that's okay because the color stays in, doesn't come off. And I cut it in half to make it easy to use when I'm doing things like the Stamparatus. Now if you're doing this, make sure you're using the Stampin' Write pens. They are water-based pens. Do not use your Stampin' Blends because they are alcohol-based, they're permanent, and all they'll do is stain your stamp and won't come off. So you'll just have stained color on your stamp and nothing on your cardstock. So now that that's clean, I'm going to do the colors. So I'm going to do Petal Pink for the mind part. The only trouble with this is it's not that easy to see it because it looks like the same color of the actual stamp, which is another reason I'm using the Stamparatus. But being such big letters, you can, if you have the pens, you can color in any errors. So my other one, when I stamped it, it was a bit light, and I went and colored it in with the pens afterwards. So I think I've got that all. And I just like to rub over. You don't have to worry about getting the halo effect when you use the Stamparatus, you know, when you stamp and you wobble your block, because it can't possibly wobble. So it's only going to transfer the ink from where... Okay, so see how that's quite light? So I can color that more, or I could take the pen and just color it in right there on the image. And so that was stamped with the stamp pad, so it's darker, but you can add a bit of color if you need to. So I'm going to try to get a bit darker. I think I will try this different method, and I will, because it's such a light ink, I'm going to do one letter at a time so it doesn't actually dry too quick. These are nice big letters, so it's easy to do. Sorry about the wobbling. That's better. I'm liking the faintness of this, actually. But it's not quite as dark as I'd like, so... Okay. Oh, that's looking quite interesting. I like the mottled effect. It's not nice and solid, it's just kind of a faint look. And the last bit, the M. The other one should come out better because it's a darker ink. So we'll see if that one works better and I don't have to do this multiple times. I don't know if you're like me. Sometimes I like to watch videos and watch people color. I don't know, it's just fascinating. You're watching it and you think, oh, I can just fast forward this part. I know they're just going to color that in. But sometimes it's interesting watching them. Okay, so just making sure the cardstock hasn't moved. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the other. So I'm not going to bother to clean it off because I'm not coming anywhere near that with my other pen. So it might actually pick up some color. So now this is Calypso Coral, which is the background color for the Designer Series paper. So the petal pink is the color of the scrap I had. And there's petal pink in that Designer Series paper as well. And see, this is much easier to see that I've got full coverage. I'm just slightly going back over everything. Make sure I didn't miss anything. And let's see if this comes out better. Ooh, yes, I kind of like that. Let's try a little bit darker and see what happens. Okay, I just noticed I got it on the wrong part. At least this one I can see where the ink's going. And the nice thing with the Stamparatus is you can do multiple goes in the exact same spot. That's why it's a placement tool. Okay, that's good. So the other one, as I said, I used the ink pad, so you got a more solid color. This one using the pens is giving me a mottled kind of look, which I like. I like that. Looks good. So I'll clean that up later. And now, what I want to do different on this one as well is I'm going to give it a shape. So this I just cut rectangle. This one I'm going to use the fourth size, the middle size of, it's the middle size of the Deckled rectangles. So I'm going to use the middle size, And you notice it's a bit too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset it and cut it. And then I'm going to put it through again and cut that other side. So I will pause you and do that and be right back. Okay, so I cut that with like that, all right? Now you might be tempted, now I want that on this side. You might be tempted to go this way to get that edge there, but you're then going to cut over that side that you've got. So that's given me this interesting shape. If it was just a straight square or something, that would be fine, but because it's got the deckled part, if I slide it over, I'm then going to be cutting over the deckled part I have there. So the way to do this is to just put your die on this side, and then that's the part you're going to get. This will be your waste paper. So that's the trick to doing, using a bigger die to make something smaller. So see, I now have a nice shape there, and now I have an interesting scrap piece that I could use for something else. Okay, so that ended up being here, and that's how it came apart. All right, now the final thing I'm going to die cut are some leaves. So this, I could even go this direction. I'll cut the leaves and then decide which direction I want to do the card. So I'm going to do the same leaves from here. This is from our new Paper Florist die set. So there's lots of dies that do different sections to create build-up flowers. I did a video last month for the Global Monthly Video Hop. We were doing in colors, but I used this die set. And so if you want to see these dies in use, have a look at last month's. So I'm going to use this die because I quite like the size of that and kind of gives us the same sort of shape that I've created there. And I'm going to cut 3 leaves. It's always good to do things in odd numbers, so 3 or 5, but I think 5 would be too busy. So I'm going to do 3 of those, and then I'll come design the front of the card. Okay, so using that die, I have cut 3 leaves. So I got my 3 leaves, and it's quite nice because the way they're stitched, it almost mimics our background here. And so I've ended up with that. That's a pretty interesting scrap piece. I could maybe do another cut there, and I could even use that on the background. Or I could use that scrap piece and sponge over it and get that image sponged on cardstock. So when you have scraps, look at them not as rubbish, extra, throwaway. Look at them as something that you can create with. So for this guy, I'm just going to think of how I want the design to look to see if I've got enough room there, or I could do it this way. But no, I'm thinking it looks better sideways. So we're going to go with the sideways. Make sure you're opening your card the right direction. Oh, so this one opens top to bottom. So now that I know where that's going to go, I'm going to pop this up on some dimensionals, and then I'm going to tuck my leaves in. That's always a good idea because that way, if I were to stick my leaves down first, I might not, I might cover them up too much with my front piece. So if you put your dimensionals on, another trick you could do is if you know where your leaf's going to go, like if I know I want my leaf to be, say, coming out this way, I could put the dimensional on the bottom of the section to hold it in place. So we're just going to go with the central look and a bit of glue. I think I'll just kind of follow the one I had there. Might go. Just wondering about having some, maybe come around all the sides, not just out one way. No, I think that looks a bit off center. Okay, so I think I'll glue this one down, so I'll pop a little bit of glue. Keep in mind, if you got something like this, there's holes in it, try not to put the glue right where the holes are because it'll just ooze out. So just a little bit just to hold it in place. You know, unless you're giving it to a child who might try to pull it apart, it should be fine just with a little bit of glue just on the edges and not too close to the edge. And we'll put this. The other nice thing with these kind of embellishments is if you have a flaw in the background, you can cover it up with your little embellishments. Now the other leaves, I want them to pop up slightly. So I'm going to use my mini dimensionals, but they are still a bit too big for these leaves. So I'm going to cut them in half. So sometimes I just go through and cut a whole bunch in half in one go. So I do that, cut a whole strip in half, and then I've got half sizes that I can use. And I can just pop them. I'm not going to put them on every leaf, only every couple leaves. And I've got to think of where I'm going to put this. So I want this leaf to hang up there, so I'm not going to put one there, but I'll put one on the opposite side. So that was there, so that's the opposite side. And being white, they're not really going to show through very much on the back. And maybe there. And then just one up. There. So I'll just put a few dimensionals on there and feel that backing off. And just going to slip that guy in there. And then this one I want to do the same thing on the other side. So I want one on this side. And then one on the top. And just another one on the opposite side. Should be fine. If you're worried about it getting squished in the mail or something, you could add more dimensionals. But if you're hand delivering it, it probably doesn't matter. Now, when you take the backing off, some people have trouble telling if they've taken it off. You could touch it to see if it's sticky, but that might take some stickiness off. But if you hold it at an angle, you can see the shininess of the sticky versus the dullness of the paper. So we're going to pop this guy in there. And put our inside in, which I have now lost. Oh, there we go. And being a rectangle, I'm going to use my tear and tape. The other thing too is you decide whether you want that on that side or you want it on that side. I like it on the right side better. But again, because it's not on the front, it's going on the inside, it's not going to be messed about too much. A lot of times I only just put strips on either side. I don't go the whole hog and put it all around the whole inside. The other thing with that is if you only put them on the sides, you actually have a slot there if you wanted to slip some, you know, a gift card or some secret message in the inside. So again, my tab method, make sure I've got the evenness on all the sides. I'm happy with that. I press down the sticky parts and peel it off. So there's actually a gap there if I wanted to put something in there, but it doesn't really matter if it's not glued down. It's up to you. So there you go. There's the card done. So it showed you a couple different ways of doing the words on the front. This one's got the embossed ferns. This one has the die cut layering. What was it? Layering leaves? Stitched greenery. Stitched greenery. We both of them have used the good feelings. And I've showed you several different ways to use scraps. That we were using the ink Botanicals, as well as the leaf from the paper Florist dies. So I hope you've enjoyed that. That's my other scrap one that I made earlier, focusing on the designer series paper for the background. So if you like that, please give me a thumbs up. Make sure you click on the links to look at everybody else's videos. I will be listing these products below, so if you want to purchase any, contact your demonstrator or contact me. I'd love to be your demonstrator. Make sure you subscribe so you'll see future videos, know when they're coming out. I do the Global Monthly video. It's usually in New Zealand. It's actually live at 2 a.m. on a first Thursday of the month, but that mirrors that it's the first Wednesday of the month on the Northern Hemisphere. So if the first Thursday of the month is the first of the month, it will be the following week. But this one, if the first day of the month is on a Wednesday, you'll see my videos go live on the Thursday morning in New Zealand, or other side of the world, it's actually Wednesday. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks so much for watching, and have a lovely day. Bye.